Good evening and welcome to the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee meeting of Tuesday, December 1st, 2020. First order of business is identify any potential conflicts of interest. The packet, you've been given the packet. Is there anything in there that you feel might be conflicting for you? If there is, please let me know now. Hearing none, we'll move on to citizen comments. At this time, we'll entertain comments from any citizens. And they're invited to step up to the mic, but I see nothing but staff out there. So we'll move on to the next, and that is the consent agenda. That's the minutes of November 17th, 2020 regular meeting, the monthly position control report, and the bills and payroll. What's your wishes? Motion by Wetzel, second by Becky to approve. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So carried. And there are no items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to request to recommend council approval for closure of TIF number 2, the Purdy Building District. And this is presented by Mr. Allen. Ron, take it away. I saw your, I hope you're going to go over your
Yes, thank you. So really what we're looking for is just the okay to move forward, the general direction to close TID 2. There's a lot of steps that, we can bring back the actual closure procedure. To close it in 2021, we would have to take action by April 15th. We'd have to have a resolution by April 15th of 2021. But we just kind of want to agree on the direction at this point. So what I have in the packet is, first of all, a little background about TID 2. It's a site-specific TID. It's been paid off since 2014. In 2018, after we did all the cleanup, it had a positive $448,000. So that's when we began the first TID donor donation to TID 7. So on an annual basis, right now, it's just being kept open solely to donate to TID 7. It can also donate to TID 5, but TID 5's in really good shape. So we're just keeping it open right now to help support TID 7. So really we have three options. I'll start with actually option 2, which is, option 2 is kind of keep doing the same thing. We just keep it open and we donate $110,000 per year to TID 7. And a little while later I have the analysis of each option. Option 1 is close it in 2021. So in 2021, it would still collect all the taxes for the year, donate to TID 7. We'd zero out the balance and then return it to the tax roll. So if you look at the assessed valuation, it'd be like a $5 million new construction essentially coming back onto the tax roll. Option 3 is use the affordable housing extension for a year and then close it. And as Mr. Witzel pointed out, I did kind of change my tune a little bit on this one. We were really looking at the affordable housing extension, but currently I think getting it back on the tax roll gives a little precedent. So if you look at the second page, what I did here is just kind of looked at the effect of the different options. So option 1 and 2, essentially what that says is if we keep TID 2 open and we just use it to donate to TID 7, it really doesn't move the needle too much for TID 7. It moves it up 1 year. We project that we would be able to close TID 7 in 2027 versus 2028. And all the projections we do are very conservative, no growth, no tax rate increase, so we do a very static forecast. And what I did is I did kind of a sensitivity analysis because the worst thing that could happen is we close TID 2 and then TID 7 does end up needing a donor district. So what I have there is just kind of a sensitivity analysis. And we said, we play with the variables, how many bad things could happen to TID 7 and it still closes. So what we did is we said no growth, no tax increases, and the value in TID 7 would go down 40%, immediately and not recover. And even under those assumptions, it still closes a year early. So that just kind of gives you a sense for, how much room we have for there. I also talked a little bit about TID 5, just because theoretically TID 2 could donate to TID 5. So I covered it in the memo, but we wouldn't do that because TID 7 is the most likely donor. Option 3, the affordable housing extension, kind of lists the statutes there. I talked to Josh today again about it. We still think it's a good idea, but possibly in the future. One thing to know about the affordable housing extension is there's not kind of a cookie cutter plan, what you do with it. And so we've been monitoring the league, putting out information on it. There's only a handful of cities that have taken advantage of it because it's relatively new. So what I'm saying here is we don't have a, shovel-ready project. It's something that development services would have to propose, develop, get approved, and start it off. So that would take a little bit of time. Again, it's still, I think, a good option, but it's just not the priority now. And it would take a little time to come up with something. Some of the things, I'm trying to think what some of the things that some of the cities were doing were everything from street projects in low-income areas to housing rehabilitation loans and those kind of things. So those are kind of the three options. So I kind of rank them as one, close it, put it back on the tax roll. Two, there is some benefit to keeping it open for a little bit longer, donate to TID 7. And then option 3, affordable housing, it's not my preference, but that's what I wanted to discuss. So the timeline is we need to file a resolution by April 15 to close. And we wouldn't bring a resolution until probably April 1st, early April, because it starts a timeline, like certain things have to be done within 6 months of filing that resolution. So we'd wait till at least March, if not April, to start that. So, and we'll bring that detail back. So I'll stop there and kind of open it up for questions.
Mr. Handler first, and then Mr. Witzel. Did you have your hand up, Nick? Oh, go ahead.
No.
Okay. Mr. Handler.
Thank you. Ron, I have a question for you. When you suggested closing it, I was always under the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you want to close a TID and you have a positive balance, as you had indicated, do we not have to share that with the people that are involved there?
Sure, yeah, that is correct. Since this is a donor district, what we would do is 2021, they would collect their taxes in TID 2 like normal, and we donate it to TID 7. So we'd basically force a zero balance in 2021 and then close it. The other option that's what we would do. We're not going to have that option in TID 5 because when TID 5 closes, it likely we'll have a surplus and then we pay it back to the other jurisdictions based on the percentage of their mill rate.
Well, the reason I asked, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the reason I ask is, originally that's what got us into trouble by taking things out of the TIDs. And I just don't want to see that happen again.
No, understood. Yep, this is just a straight donor transfer like we've been doing now for the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. I guess I would really like to see at some point we utilize the options to do the affordable housing. I do have a question regarding that. That's whether or not we can utilize that money to prepare for buildable lots. I think what we're lacking right now from what I hear is we've got builders that want to build. They just don't have anywhere to build because we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the roads. We don't have the sewer connections, all that. So wondering if that can be done. Now, I don't know, listening to what you're saying, I don't know that maybe this TID is the best to do that with. Perhaps we wait for 5, wait for 7. I guess I would be in favor of going along with your recommendation. I also think it shows good faith to those other entities that have been waiting and waiting and waiting and saying, how soon? We throw them a bone, say, hey, here you go, or we're closing this one. You're going to start getting some of the benefit pretty quick. And then maybe that helps to ease things a little bit when we extend for the 1-year affordable housing option, some of the others. So I guess I don't know if you know whether or not those monies can be used to prepare those lots, make those buildable lots, or you want to touch on that at all?
No, my understanding is that what you can use it for is fairly broad, and that's what I'm saying is there's not a cookie cutter program that we could just adopt. What you're saying sounds reasonable, and from my understanding, would likely qualify. I can't say that for sure, but that's the type of program that is allowed under the extension.
If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to ask a question right now. Ron, first of all, on that affordable housing, there's no geographic restriction on that. Like it doesn't have to benefit the same kid that is donating the money, right? It could go to, it could go anywhere in town and not necessarily even be in a TID district. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the requirement is it's got to be a lower income area.
Okay.
That's tied to a lot of it.
Okay, and let's see, if we don't use number 2 to do that, what is the earliest date of the next TID to close?
We're forecasting, so TID 2 is generating about $110,000 a year. We're forecasting that TID 5, the Mill Creek Business Park, which is generating, $600,000 to $800,000 a year, would close in 2023.
So we would have to wait like 3 years. So essentially, if we wanted to do an affordable housing thing out of TID, what, 5, you say?
Correct.
5. If we want to do that, then development department would have to start planning and working on that right now, or pretty much.
Yeah, that was my discussion with Josh, by looking forward to 5, it gives them a little more time to come up with, gives them a little more time and more money to look at options and present them probably in 2022 as far as what the program might look like.
Because you'd have to do the same thing. You'd have to have, if it was ready to close out in 2023, you'd have to notify them by April to start the process again, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions? Mr. Barb? I can't hear you, Steve.
Good.
Unmute it, Steve.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I got it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm very sorry, Chairman, about that, that I was muted. Anyway, I just want to chime in, about this discussion. I apologize for the way it was worded on the agenda. Could give the impression that this was a final sign-off by the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee rather than, starting the process. But certainly, we don't want to spend time and energy working on this and trying to get to the finish line if the committee isn't supportive. So we're looking for that direction tonight.
Any other questions? We need a motion one way or the other. Do we have one? Mr. Witzel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will move this forward to the council to recommend approval of the closure of this TID in the timeline provided, AKA option number 2 as presented. That would be my motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Paschal, Mrs. Spiros. Okay, so everybody was anxious to get that one. That's good. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Anybody opposed? Nope. Okay. So we'll show it passing unanimously. Thank you, Ron. Next up is the request to recommend council approve to refill a vacant wastewater operator position presented by Sam Warp. Sam, you're already at the podium. Good.
Try to keep it moving along. About 2 weeks ago, we received the resignation letter for Jake Sharon. He'd been a wastewater operator for us for just over 5 years. He decided to pursue a career with a local contractor. Very sad to see him go because Jake was trained in to do every single job at the wastewater plant. He was very good at it. But he made that choice, so we move on. And why I'm here to ask to refill that position is, I guess, some of the basics for residents that are watching us at home. The reason you have manholes out in the road is so you can clean the pipes underneath the ground, the infrastructure underneath the road. That's your only access is through manholes. And that's why you need at least 2 operators, like when you're cleaning, because you need someone by the truck at one manhole and someone at the other manhole. And it's the same when you're televising. You need one by the camera truck at one manhole and someone at the other manhole. And so you always have to have 2 people, otherwise that equipment just stays in the shop. It's not safe to do it. And it's the same when you're lateral televising. You need, each person carries in half the equipment, they put it together. one person's pushing the camera down through the lateral and the other one's watching the actual screen and writing down all the comments that they're seeing so they can evaluate whether the lateral needs replacing or not. So those 6 operators divide up into 3 teams, and if we didn't refill this position, one of those teams would be parked because we wouldn't have enough people to do it. And that would greatly increase the chance of having a basement backup because all 3 of these are for preventive maintenance for the homeowners. So that's why I'm asking to refill the position in a timely manner. I mean, I realize it's the holidays, it's going to drag things out. We're fine with that. We want to get the right candidate versus getting the first one. The last thing I'd like to say on it is that this comes out of utility fees. None of this money comes out of property taxes at all. So has no effect on the mill rate or any of that other stuff. This is all utility rate based from people who pay their monthly utility bill.
You ever get the feeling that's why we like you so much?
That could be. Therefore, I'd recommend that the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee approve filling the vacant position of the wastewater treatment plant operator.
Motion by Handler, second by Spiros. Discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Then the motion is unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
You do. Next up is the recommendation of council for approval to re-implement the temporary use of sick leave due to COVID-19 exposure, presented by Jen Reku, who is on the screen in front of me. Oh, Jen, go ahead.
Thank you. As you're probably aware, we currently have a sick leave policy that allows employees to take time off for their own personal illness, or they have up to 40 hours per year that they can take for care of a family member. That's 40 hours for full-time employees and prorated for part-time employees. You know, as we have seen an increase or a surge of COVID in our area, we've had more and more employees that have had exposures or have become ill. When we had last had our emergency declaration back in March, we had done a temporary extension of sick leave at that time so that if we had an employee whose family member was ill or if the employee was quarantined, that they could use sick time. We actually had come up with that before the laws were in place or around the same time, trying to ensure that we had coverage for our employees in the event that they weren't able to work. However, as we continue to see this surge, we've had a number of employees who have gone out on leave due to a quarantine or an illness. And if they have an illness, if they would exhaust their paid leave time through the policies, ultimately they would be able to use sick time. However, if they have a family member who would be sick and they would be quarantined for some time after that family member has been ill, sometimes it goes beyond the 2 weeks that have been allotted under the federal laws and under the Emergency Responder Sick Leave Act that we put in place back in March. So ultimately, we haven't had a lot of people that have reached this level yet. We've been fortunate in the fact that the emergency responder sick leave and the federal laws policies have covered our employees. However, as we continue to see this change, we want to ensure that we're doing what's right for our employees. So what we're requesting is to allow an additional temporary relaxation of our sick leave policy that would allow our employees to utilize their own accumulated sick leave balances for time away from work due to COVID exposures, even if they're not ill themselves, if they're quarantined due to either an exposure to someone else or an immediate family member. So really that is our request at this point. We don't want this to go on forever. We have looked to extend this right now through the end of February just to ensure that we have some coverage. Right now, all of the emergency responder leave policies and the federal policies are set to expire at the end of the year. I anticipate that we might see some extensions with those. However, at this point, we're not sure. And if those policies were to exhaust, then we'd certainly want to allow our employees to use some sick leave for their time away if they have it accumulated. I'm certainly happy to take any questions. If you've got other ideas, if you want to limit the amount of sick hours, maybe that employees could use for this reason, that would certainly be something to consider as well. At this point, I didn't put any limits on it, not knowing kind of where individual employees may be required to be out. At most, it's been somewhere between 21 and 28 days. But again, we've not seen that much here. So at this point, staff is recommending approval of the temporary use of employees' accrued paid leave if the employee is placed on leave due to COVID-19 exposure, as directed by the city administrator in conjunction with the department division head, Department of Health, or medical provider if the employee is not exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms and is not able to telework through February 28th, 2021.
We have a motion by Spiros, I assume, to approve the recommendation. Is there a second?
Yes.
No, Nick, you're the second. Becky, you made the motion.
Yes.
Right, okay. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Wetzel.
Thank you. In looking through the policy here, just trying to wrap my brain around what's what here. Employees working 8-hour shifts and employees working 12-hour shifts can accumulate up to 960 hours. So that would be for the 8-hour employee, 24 weeks sick time.
Correct.
And for the officers, it would be 18 weeks. And then for the fire, they can accumulate up to 2,160 hours, which with a 24-hour shift would come out to 90 days. Okay, so what we'd be potentially doing is opening it up for the entire 24 weeks for 8-hour staff, 18 weeks for 12-hour staff, and up to 90 days for the 24-hour staff. Because we're not putting limits on, right?
Jen, go ahead. You need to answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, so keep in mind that this would only be for, if right now, if we had an employee who would become sick, those are the amounts of time that they would be out. If we have an employee who is quarantined by the health department, or, department or division head, through that process, that the time in which their quarantine is going to be somewhat limited. So typically the way it works now is if you have an employee who exhibits symptoms or is diagnosed with COVID-19, they need to quarantine for a minimum of 10 days. Depending on where their symptoms are, they need to be fever-free for 24 hours and they need to have a decrease in symptoms before they could return. If they have a family member who has been exposed, that family member, if they're not able to completely isolate from that employee at home, that family member may be quarantined for their 10 days or while they're sick. And then the employee is quarantined for an additional 14 days since that last contact. And so that's why some of these are getting longer. Now, keep in mind, we are trying to ensure that people can telework where that makes sense, but there are some jobs in which people can't do that. And then the other piece I'd like to point out is for our emergency responders, our police, our fire, our streets departments, wastewater is also included in that. The designations that we made earlier this year, if they are quarantined but they're not exhibiting any symptoms, we do have an ability to call them in to ensure that we are able to continue services. And if that is the case, we do, require some additional safety precautions with them, making sure they're masked all the time, making sure they're still separating themselves, extra cleaning precautions, and then obviously to monitor their symptoms and ensure that they're reporting anything and not working at our staff if they are exhibiting any symptoms.
And that's based on them being essential employees.
It is.
Okay, that was all my questions. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, I think that's unanimous. That was an aye, Nick?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Jen. Next item on the agenda is to adjourn to closed session. Under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19.85, sub 1, sub C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Hence, filling vacant administrative 4 position in the police department. We need a motion to go into closed session, but by Witzel, second by Paschal. Roll call, please.
Wagner? Wagner?
Yes, okay, yes. I didn't hear you. When you finish laughing, go ahead and finish the roll call, all right?
Sorry. Witzel?
Yes.
Hendler?
And look,
Hendler?
Yes.
Facial?
Yes.
Spiros?
Yes.
Thank you.
We are now in closed session.